Dear friends, Mahatma Kudumi states in a letter to AP Synod that religion is the cause of 2/3 of the evil that pursue humanity ever since that cause became a power. Nevertheless, the secret doctrine is the synthesis of religion, philosophy and science. And moreover, the Mahachohan says that the Theosophical Society was chosen as the cornerstone, the foundation of the future religion of humanity. So it's not difficult to conclude that by the word religion, two different things are meant. Yet there must be a connection between the two. And this connection can be compared to a pure stream that flows from a source high in the mountains, and as it winds its way down to the lowlands, becomes polluted by all kinds of human activity before it empties into the sea. The pure water at the source is beneficial and inspiring, but the polluted water at the mouth brings sickness and misery. The pure water of the source is religion. The polluted water is belief. Religion is a clear idea cast in images of the unity of all life and of man as an inseparable part of it. And those images are presented in such a way that people should be able to understand them. For most of us, the idea itself is still too lofty to evoke a sense of experience of oneness. For our understanding, it requires a veil, a vehicle, so to speak. Religion teaches us to see that there is oneness and that we belong to it, that we are it. It also provides precepts on how we can become increasingly aware of that oneness. In that respect, it is similar to what is referred to as Atma Vidya in Sanskrit. Atma Vidya means knowing Atman, knowing the self, the core, the essence of the cosmos. And because humans are an integral part of the cosmos, the microcosmos, that core of the whole is also the core of humans. Religion, from the Latin religare, meaning to connect, connect again or reconnect, is the inspirational encouragement to become aware of our deepest self. That is our principal responsibility as humans. However, as soon as we place the core, the divine, outside ourselves, degeneration sets in. We then believe that we cannot do it on our own. We invent mediators, preachers, pandits, priests, of whom we think they are indispensable for our salvation. We start worshipping the divine instead of invoking it within ourselves. We no longer feel capable of or responsible for our own progress and salvation. We have been prepared for manipulation and blindly follow the dogmas presented as absolute truths. In the worst case, we can be sent to the front as cannon fodder if the priest tells us that this is God's will. You know it, religious wars are the most brutal. It is therefore of the utmost importance that we keep the source, the true wisdom religion, pure. And that source is located in the hierarchy of wisdom and compassion, which at regular intervals presents the same ancient message in a form that suits the people to whom the message is offered. Time and again, these pure ideas are proclaimed, but over time, these ideas are no longer understood or are only half understood. The deeper background is lost. They become dogmas that cannot be questioned, that cannot be discussed, but that you simply have to believe. The beginning is ideas, the end is dogmas. And these dogmas deprive humans of the most essential aspect of their existence, free will. Now the masters will do everything in their power to prevent, or at least minimize, the chance of the ideas degenerating. They know the human psyche, they know how humans think, they know how to stimulate their universal thinking aspects. The wise men of antiquity understood that if they wanted to convey universal ideas to people, they could only do so by using anthropocentric language, words that could be recognized from the standpoint and from the knowledge and understanding and the experiences that most humans presently have. That's why they use human language, human similes, and human stories. In this way, they were able to focus humanity's attention on those universal ideas. Therefore, the masters will always present their ideas based on the thinking habits of humanity as they are at a given moment. They search for the words and concepts, they clothe their ideas in images that humanity can understand. There's another important element that you should realize if you want to understand the spiritual value of religious similes, or to further elaborate on the metaphor of the river, if you want to drink the pure water from the source, and it is that the masters present the ideas in adumbration. They provide a sketch. Compare it to a person standing on the top of a mountain and looking down into the valley. He sees no details, only the vague outlines of what is in the valley. And by doing this, they, and the masters, stimulate everyone to think for themselves, to work out the general ideas by their own independent research. It's difficult to dogmatize a broad sketch. Instead, it can be very inspiring to motivate one to start looking for more truth. It may be difficult to imagine that The Secret Doctrine, a book of about 1400 pages, is an adumbration of the esoteric philosophy. Yet, it is nothing more than an image, an idea that humanity, if it tries very hard, can just about understand. This is something we should all realize. We have only caught a glimpse of the wisdom religion. It is our task to ponder that glimpse carefully, to digest it, to incorporate its consequences into our thinking so that we can absorb more in later cycles. If we think that this is the end point of all knowledge, we are polluting the river of inspiration. If there is no hunger within us for greater wisdom, for a deeper religious understanding of the purpose of life we lead, then no religious picture, however pure, will help us take a single step forward. Master Kutumi says the receptivity must be equal to the desire to instruct. The illumination must come from within. So, if we expect illumination to come from outside ourselves, in whatever form, then religion becomes worship. Degeneration also occurs when we consider similes and metaphors and myths and even terms as absolute truth. We need words. Every science, every philosophy and religion needs a vocabulary so that ideas can be exchanged. We cannot yet grasp ideas and exchange them with each other without words. But let us always regard words as the carrier of ideas and not the ideas themselves. A Chinese Taoist once wrote, "Where is the man who will forget my words so that I can talk to him?" The words chosen by the masters in the secret doctrine, for as Master Kutumi says, this book is the work of him, Master Moria and HPB, serve to reopen to us the most exalted idea we can currently conceive. In doing so, the chance that it would become dogma had to be as small as possible. In this context, have you ever wondered why the word principle was chosen for the first fundamental proposition of the secret doctrine? The three fundamental propositions contain the entire wisdom religion, the adumbration of the great process in which the cosmos and men have become what they are now and what possibilities still exist for us. The latter is also masterly reflected in the other masterpiece, much smaller but perhaps even more important, the voice of the silence. The word principle is a good example of the anthropocentric way of teaching, of trying to awaken something in us. The word can be used in an abstract and in a concrete material sense. Of course, the way it is used in the secret doctrine is purely abstract, an omnipresent, eternal, boundless, and immutable principle. It lies beyond the reach of human thought. It transcends human understanding. We cannot say anything concrete about it. It's not this, it's not that, it's nothing in particular, and yet it is everything, and everything comes from it. Even the most trivial thought or the most exalted Buddha comes from it and is it. How wise it was to choose the word principle. A principle is an abstraction, just as tree or 10 or red or blue are abstractions. Tree, what? Red, what? Of course there are red things and there are three things, but in and of themselves, they are nothing. And the same goes for the word principle. It means conception, basis, foundation. However, conception of what? Basis of what? That is not stated in the first fundamental proposition because it cannot be communicated. It is the basis of nothing in particular, and at the same time of everything. The boundless principle is nothing, no thing, and yet everything. The great paradox. The starting point of all religious awareness, because it not only evokes a sense of kinship with even the most distant galaxy we can imagine, but when we ponder it long and profoundly, we even feel something of the all-encompassing oneness of all life. Then we will also understand how this idea was presented to humanity in earlier times, that is, to us in previous incarnations, if we lived in that specific civilization. The Vedic sages spoke of Tat, which means that. There was simply no other word for it. Or they spoke of Para-Brahman, which means beyond Brahman, beyond the horizon of what is imaginable to us. Even in the monotheistic religions, you can still find this idea. When the Muslim speaks of La ilaha illallah, he's addressing, probably without realizing it, an impersonal divinity. Literally, this so-called Shahada means there is no God, there is a God, a denial and affirmation in one sentence. Think about it. And when you read in another surah of the Quran that Allah was not begotten nor begets, you can only conclude that Allah is everything and that everything has therefore always existed. And take a look at the New Testament. Doesn't Paul speak that in it we live, move, and have our being? What is that it? Can you give it a name? No, because as Lao Tse says of Tao, when you give it a name, it is no longer the true Tao, because then you have limited the unlimited. And read Genesis in the correct translation, and you see that in the beginning, that is to say, in the principle, the gods, the Elohim, so arbitrarily translated as a male god, hovered over the waters. What are those waters? Blavatsky speaks about the boundless space and the waters of space, not a space, but the abstract space. Yet, we see that in all these religions, the exalted idea, the idea of the boundlessness of life, has degenerated into a god or gods outside ourselves on whom we are dependent. Even the purest philosophical religion, Buddhism, and certainly in its Western form, but unfortunately also in many places in the East, is degenerated into worship, where people pray to Buddha to fulfill their wishes. This is the historical overview of 18 million years. The message has been conveyed repeatedly, initially in the early stages during the third root race, when thinking had just awakened and we were still instinctively absorbing ideas. We were taught like toddlers. According to the secret doctrine, the religion of that time had no dogmas or churches, but there was nevertheless a semi-conscious, instinctive awareness of the unity of life. That awareness was lost during the period of adolescence we call Atlantis. Other images, more suited to the often violent mentality of the time, were used to keep at least some of the religious awareness alive. But much knowledge had to be kept secret for fear that it would otherwise be misused for selfish purposes. The mystery schools were founded. The exoteric side of these schools attempted to keep the intuition of the masses alive with religious myths, parables, but in the course of time the imagery was interpreted literally and the message was lost in the winds that raged throughout the centuries. Time and again, degeneration occurred. The appearance of HPB and the founding of the Theosophical Society are yet another attempt to view religion as it was truly intended. The worship of images, saints, gods, and the authority we attribute to priests we'll all have to change again by placing responsibility back in the hands of humans. Developing discipline is undoubtedly part of this. Discipline is an important element in religion. The Roman statesman and philosopher Cicero derives religion from relegere, meaning to read again, in the sense of choosing and adhering to the best we know. This is an important idea because it shows that religion is not based on faith or belief, but on independently choosing a certain guideline. You adhere to that guideline which has emerged from your own image of unity. The experience of religion, therefore, depends on your own understanding. It's impossible to impose or transfer that understanding on others. Or, as the Quran says, there is no compulsion in religion. And of course, the essence of the perception of religion of any individual is the same. That is the unity of all life. But everyone, based on their own developed consciousness, forms their own mental images of it. And then you give shape to what you have understood about unity in your own life. People with a greater range of consciousness will have a more comprehensive picture of that unity than others who are still more limited. Is that a problem? Not at all. We all have boundlessness behind us in which we have made ourselves into the man or woman we are today, nothing more and nothing less. These differences support society. Everyone can consider and fulfill their obligations towards others, towards society. And the greater your range of consciousness, the greater is your responsibility and related duties. When everyone fulfills his duty from his own mental image of unity, there is a dynamic harmony. Such a society is described in the Acts of the Apostles, in which all those who belong to the community contributed themselves and received from the community the means to do so. Plato sketches the same picture in the Republic. But in order to commit yourself to the community, you need at least some religious awareness. Religion provides answers to the questions of where life is leading and what its purpose is. Only when you have a satisfactory answer to these questions, however imperfect it may be, will you be able to fully understand your place in the whole and naturally fulfill your duty towards your fellow human beings. Then you know what your individual obligation, your dharma, is. This Sanskrit word means duty, but it also means religion. After all, the motto of the Theosophical Society is Satyat Nasti Paro Dharma, no religion higher than truth. There is one fundamental truth in the universe, a universal, all-encompassing truth, the essential oneness of all that lives. But everyone can derive from that universal truth their own mental image of truth, of unity, of religion, of dharma, their duty. And by doing so, you work with nature and support the whole. And how interesting it is that the word dharma is derived from the Sanskrit root dri, which means to support. Supporting is not something you do at set times, not 5 times a day as Muslims tend to do by praying, not only on Sundays in church, but 24 hours a day, 365 days a year. The religious convictions that you have developed yourself, chosen for yourself, with all its practical consequences, permeates all your thoughts and actions. Religion is not separate from society, at least not if compassion plays an important role in it. And if there is unity, if we are parts of each other, how can you not be compassionate? And therefore, if you have a correct understanding of the oneness of life, you will see no difference between uniting with your inner God and uniting with your fellow human beings. In other words, loving your inner God is the same as loving your fellow human beings. Don't we find this in the Gospels, where the following words are attributed to the avatar Jesus? The first commandment is to love your Lord, your God. That is, the God within. And the second commandment, which is equal to the first, is to love your neighbors as yourself. If loving your inner God is the same as loving your neighbors, then you can only explain that from the unity of life. If you love your own inner God, who has completely identified with the totality of life, then you also love your fellow human beings. You love them as yourself. Not your lower self, of course, who lives in the feeling of separation, but the higher self, who is the inner God. Well, if we may courteously draw some conclusion from the above with regard to the religion of the future, of which the Theosophical Society is the cornerstone, then we can establish that the following elements are necessarily part of it. Religion is about an active perception of unity, of the divine, which is not outside you, but within you. You have the responsibility to form your own mental image of the divine unity and to live accordingly to it. Religion gives you the inspiration to follow the path to your deepest self and to unite with it, which also means that you unite, or rather become aware of the unity with your fellow human beings, yes, with all that lives. Theosophists have an even greater responsibility in this regard than those who have not yet had the privilege of studying the wisdom religion. If we keep the source pure, then the tributaries of the great river of inspiration, as they take shape in the new religion, but also in science and philosophy, which should never be separated from religion, will be an adequate and accurate reflection of the truth that the hierarchy of compassion and its messengers have given us. The doctrines of karma, reincarnation, progressive evolution, and especially of the monads, the centers of unlimited consciousness that every being is, will be an integral part of it. But if theosophists water down the teachings, if they no longer study them open-mindedly, searching for more truth, or if they consider their interpretation to be the only correct one, then the religion of the future will also show such imperfections, and the seed of degeneration will already have been sown. This attempt by the hierarchy of compassion is meant to exert its inspiring influence on the society for at least 2160 years, the era of a messianic cycle. And if future generations also want to be able to taste the pure water of the spring, we must not pollute it. We keep the water pure when we let it flow, and that means we use it for the good of all humanity. If we don't use it, if we don't use the esoteric knowledge that has been given to us out of compassion, or if we only use it for ourselves and ignore the suffering in the world, it will ultimately rebound on us. The voice of the silence says, if thou wouldst have that stream of hard-earned knowledge, of wisdom heaven-born, remain sweet running waters, thou shouldst not leave it to become a stagnant pond. And we therefore keep theosophy pure when we study and disseminate it as it has been given to us, and not as we personally interpret it. Unfortunately, this has not always been the case. Under the name of theosophy, teachings are being propagated that are completely contrary to the original teachings. This does not necessarily stem from malice. It usually arises from a lack of knowledge over enthusiasm and an incorrect way of thinking. It seems to be hard to grasp that divine is within us. This is why people who study theosophy but are not yet completely free of these outdated ideas tend to mix the teachings. For example, you hear people talk about karma as if it were a force outside us, or that our missteps can be forgiven. That is not the message we have received, because we learn that karma is within us, that we are our own karma, and that a karmic act, one's own, must lead to a consequence. On the other hand, since 1875, the concept of religion has taken on a completely different meaning for many people. There are millions scattered across the earth who call themselves religious, but don't belong to any church. They don't want dogmas, but seek truth wherever they can find it. They read Buddhist sutras, they read the Bhagavad Gita, the writings of the Neo-Platonists, and the Nag Hammadi scriptures. Many of them could be included in our theosophical ranks if we could only reach them. Our task as theosophists is very difficult. On the one hand, we must spread theosophy with all our strength and abilities, because only theosophical ideas can elevate the world's mentality, can reach people's hearts and turn selfishness into selflessness, so that wars disappear. The gap between rich and poor is closed. Nature will not further be destroyed. And above all, people regain perspective and begin to experience life as meaningful. But on the other hand, we must never compromise the teachings as we have received them. We shouldn't adapt them to the trends that come and go. It's a difficult but very noble task. The more we succeed in this, the purer the religion of the future will be, and the more it will inspire many, including many future generations, to live compassionate and meaningful lives. Thank you for your attention.
Porque na vida a gente quer se conhecer. Pra